I used to believe that a simple life was enough. A good job, a stable income, a woman I loved, and 2 kids who made the world feel less chaotic. For 15 years that was my truth, until the night my wife looked me straight in the eye and said, "I don't need you anymore." The words didn't come with anger. They came with certainty, like she'd rehearsed them for months. That sentence didn't just end a marriage. It ended the version of me that believed love and loyalty could survive everything. People talk about heartbreak like it happens all at once. But it's quieter than that. It's a slow unraveling of respect, of small moments that suddenly stop mattering. I didn't know it yet. But that night was only the beginning of a story about greed, pride, and the calmest revenge I would ever plan. My name is Daniel Cooper, 48 years old, born and raised in Austin, Texas. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company. Nothing fancy, just steady, honest work. My wife Laura used to call it blue-collar charm when we first met. She taught art at a local community college back then, a dreamer who carried paint stains on her sleeves and talked about light and texture like they were poetry. We met at a neighborhood fair in 2008. I was fixing a broken booth table. She handed me a lemonade and said, "You look like a man who can build anything." I guess she was right, except I couldn't build a marriage that would last. Back then our world was small but happy. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on the north side of Austin near Burnett Road. Our weekends were filled with messy breakfasts, yard sales, and camping trips at Lake Travis. We weren't rich, but we had everything that mattered: laughter, love, and the feeling that tomorrow would always be okay. Laura's parents, the Wilkersons, lived across town in Westlake Hills. Big house, private gate, marble driveway. They liked me well enough at first, until they realized I wasn't one of them. The first sign came before the wedding. Mr. Wilkerson, a tall man with silver hair and a handshake that felt like a contract, asked to meet me at his law office. I remember sitting across from him while he slid a stack of papers across the table. "It's just standard procedure, Daniel," he said. "A prenuptial agreement. To protect family assets. Nothing personal." Laura squeezed my hand under the table and smiled nervously. "It's just legal stuff," she whispered. "You know how my dad is. I loved her. That was enough reason to sign anything. I didn't even read half of it. Love makes men reckless. Trust makes them blind." Our wedding in December 2009 was beautiful, but complicated. Her side of the family filled 2/3 of the hall, my side barely a corner. During the reception, I overheard her aunt whisper, "At least he's handy. She won't have to call a plumber." I laughed it off then. I was too proud to let their arrogance bruise me. Laura didn't notice, or maybe she pretended not to. The early years were kind. We built routines. She'd paint late into the night while I worked overtime on construction bids. I brought her coffee in the mornings. She packed lunches for me and slipped little notes inside. "Don't forget sunscreen. Love you." When our first child, Ethan, was born in 2011, we cried together. 2 years later came Lily, our tiny miracle. Life felt anchored, predictable, safe. Still, there were cracks, hairline fractures, invisible to outsiders. Laura often compared our lives to her friends. "Megan's husband just got a Tesla," she'd say while stirring her coffee. "Can you imagine driving one?" I'd smile and change the subject. I knew she came from comfort, but I thought our kind of happiness could outweigh money. I was wrong. Around our 10th anniversary, she started talking about financial independence. She followed lottery pages online, bought scratch tickets every week, and joked, "Someday I'll make us millionaires." I'd laugh, kiss her forehead, and say, "Just don't quit your day job yet." To her, it was harmless fun. To me, it was her way of reaching for something beyond us. My career stayed steady. I made $85,000 a year managing large-scale builds. It paid the bills, kept the lights on, and let us take one family vacation each summer. I never felt poor. But Laura's world was different. Her parents' circle of wealth, the ladies who brunched, the endless talk about investments and lake houses. Slowly, she started spending more time at her mother's country club than at home. When she came back, she smelled like perfume that wasn't hers, expensive borrowed luxury. I told myself marriage had phases, that this was one of them. I was a man who believed in patience. I kept fixing the leaking faucet, painting the porch, coaching Ethan's baseball team. But every night, Laura grew more distant. Her laughter with me became polite. Her phone screen glowed brighter than her smile. Then came the evening that still echoes like a verdict in my head. The kids were asleep. We sat at the kitchen table, silence thick as dust. She didn't look at me when she said it. "Daniel, I think I've changed." I waited. Changed how I don't want this. The house, the schedule's the ordinary. I want more. More what? She turned her eyes steady. Freedom. I tried to laugh to make it sound like a misunderstanding. But she didn't smile. That was when she said it calm, almost gentle. I don't need you anymore. There are moments that divide life into before and after. That was mine. I wanted to yell to ask what I'd done wrong. But instead, I just stared at her, at the woman I'd built a life around, and saw someone I barely recognized. The silence stretched. She stood up, walked away, and closed the bedroom door behind her. That night I sat in the living room, surrounded by photos of us, smiles frozen in time. The sound of the ceiling fan was the only thing moving. I thought about every nail I'd hammered into the walls of that house, every promise I'd made. I didn't know yet that her idea of freedom would soon come with a winning lottery ticket, and that the same money that freed her would be what brought her down. The next morning, when I dropped the kids off at school, Ethan asked Dad, "Are you and Mom fighting?" I forced a smile. "No, buddy. Just thinking." He nodded like he understood more than he should have. Driving to work, I looked at the city skyline, the cranes, the buildings I'd helped raise from dirt. There was a strange calm settling in me. Maybe it was shock. Or maybe it was the quiet acceptance that something irreversible had begun. Either way, I felt a clarity I hadn't in years. People think revenge begins with rage. It doesn't. It begins with silence, the kind that gives you time to see the truth clearly. That was the day I stopped trying to fix my marriage and started remembering who I was before I needed to prove anything to anyone. I was Daniel Cooper, builder by trade, man of patience. And soon enough, that patience would become the foundation of the smartest revenge I'd ever plan. It started like any other Tuesday. The Texas sun had just climbed high enough to warm the windows of our kitchen when Laura screamed my name from the living room. "Daniel, come here quick." For a second, I thought something was wrong with the kids. But when I walked in, she was frozen in front of the TV, clutching a small lottery ticket in her hand. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. "Look," she whispered. On the screen, the announcer was reading the winning Powerball numbers for the Texas draw. Every one of them matched. I blinked once, twice, waiting for the trick. But she was already crying, laughing, jumping up and down. We won, Daniel, $9.8 million. For a full minute, I couldn't speak. The absurdity of it pressed down on me. I hugged her, trying to steady both of us, and she kept saying, "It's real. It's real. We're rich." Ethan and Lily ran in confused, then started laughing because we were laughing. It felt like a movie scene laughter, disbelief, the sound of champagne somewhere in my imagination. For a few precious minutes, it was pure joy. Then she reached for her phone. "I have to call my parents," she said, already dialing. That was when something shifted. Within hours, the Wilkersons arrived at our house, her parents, her brother, even her aunt. They came armed with congratulations and champagne bottles, treating the living room like a victory parade. I sat back on the couch, letting the noise swirl around me. Laura was radiant, standing in the center of it all, retelling the story of how she'd picked the right numbers, her father clapping her shoulder like a coach proud of a winning athlete. Someone mentioned financial advisors, trust funds taxes. I remember thinking we hadn't even cashed the ticket yet. That night, after everyone left, Laura sat across from me at the table. She looked different, almost detached. "We need to be smart about this," she said. "Dad knows a guy in Dallas who handles large winnings. He can set everything up so we're protected." I asked, trying to sound calm. She hesitated. "Well, yes, I bought the ticket, but of course we'll figure out what's fair." That word fair hung in the air like dust. I wanted to believe she was just overwhelmed. But there was a chill in her tone, something possessive I hadn't heard before. I nodded slowly. "We'll talk to your dad's guy," I said, even though a small voice inside me whispered that I'd just agreed to something I didn't understand. The next morning, the media caught wind of it. A local news reporter came by to film a short segment. They interviewed Laura in our driveway. "Tell us how it feels to be Austin's newest millionaire," the reporter asked. "It's unbelievable," she said with a laugh. "I've been playing these numbers for years. Persistence pays off. And your husband, how does he feel about this?" She hesitated, then smiled politely. "He's happy for me. Not us. Me." That single pronoun sliced through the sound of applause from the neighbors. She handed the reporter the ticket, posed for a photo, and turned her head slightly so the camera caught her best angle. I stood in the background, clapping like a stranger. The next few days felt like living beside a storm. Laura spent hours on calls with banks and advisors. She made lists of things she wanted to buy: cars, a vacation home near the lake, a European trip to reset. When I suggested setting aside a portion for the kids' college fund, she smiled thinly. "Let's just enjoy this first, Daniel. We've earned it." But the truth was, I hadn't earned it. Not in her eyes. By the end of the week, she'd bought a brand new Tesla Model Y, crimson red with white interior. She took selfies beside it, tagging her friends with captions like, "Hard work and faith pay off." The irony stung. She hadn't worked a day since the semester ended. I watched from the porch as she drove off to show the car to her mother. When she came back, she handed me a designer shopping bag. "Got you something?" Inside was a watch, sleek, expensive, completely not me. "I thought you could use an upgrade," she said. "You can't keep wearing those construction boots and that old Casio forever." "Thanks," I murmured, setting it aside. "You don't like it." "It's nice. Just not necessary." She shrugged. "That's what money is for, making unnecessary things possible." It was meant as a joke, but her laugh didn't reach her eyes. That weekend, her social media became a showroom of luxury. Pictures at fine restaurants, her holding champagne flutes with friends I'd never met. One post read, "Freedom looks good on me." The comments poured in heart emojis. "Congratulations, Envy." I scrolled through in silence. Every photo made her look farther away. One night I came home from work late and found her on a video call with her parents. She was saying, "I think we'll move to something bigger, something that fits this new life." When she saw me, she muted the call. "What's that about?" I asked. "Just exploring options," she said. "Dad's helping me look at properties near Lakeway." "Helping you?" She sighed. "Daniel, please, don't start making this about pride. I thought it was about partnership." She looked at me like I was slow to catch on. "I've carried this marriage for years. You wouldn't understand managing this kind of money." I wanted to shout to remind her I was the one who paid every bill, who kept the house standing. But I said nothing. 3 days later, she hosted a small dinner at our home. The same people from the champagne night showed up again, this time with even more bottles. They toasted to Laura, to fortune, to new beginnings. I sat at the edge of the table sipping water while her father raised his glass. To my daughter, who always knew she was meant for more. They all clinked glasses laughing. Laura leaned over and whispered, "Don't look so gloomy. Smile for once." "I am smiling," I said quietly. "Then smile like someone who matters," she murmured before turning away. That was the moment I realized I'd become a guest in my own life. Later that night, after everyone left, I went to our bedroom. The closet on her side was half empty. Boxes sat by the door labeled storage. "What's this?" I asked. "I'm moving some things to the condo downtown, just for a while." "A condo? It's temporary." "I need space, Daniel. Time to think." "And you couldn't think here." She looked right at me, her expression calm, almost rehearsed. "You wouldn't understand. I need freedom to see what this next chapter looks like." I stared at her, trying to find the woman I married, the one who used to paint sunrise over Lake Travis because she said it reminded her of hope. All I saw was someone chasing reflection in a glass of champagne. When I went outside to breathe, the air felt heavier than usual. Across the street, our neighbor waved, then hesitated, unsure whether to offer congratulations or condolences. I waved back half-heartedly. Through the window, I could see Laura on her phone again, smiling brightly, the glow of the screen lighting her face. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me, the same one I'd installed years ago, thinking how something so simple could keep moving in circles forever, no matter how many times you flipped the switch. In the morning, she left early, dressed sharply, smelling like success and distance. She kissed the kids on the forehead, but didn't look at me. Her voice was cheerful when she said, "Don't wait up. I have meetings." Meetings? She'd never used that word before. When the door closed, the silence in the house felt final. I made coffee, sat by the kitchen window, and watched the sunlight creep across the counter. There was still a faint lipstick mark on the mug she'd used the night before. For a moment, I imagined wiping it away. But then I left it there, a quiet reminder of everything fading. In the weeks that followed, the gap between us became measurable by miles, by messages that went unanswered by her absence at family dinners. The woman who once shared my mornings now shared her nights with a world that worshipped her good fortune. And I stayed quiet, watching, waiting. Because deep down, I knew storms like this always end the same way. When the lightning finally burns out, all that's left is what's real. She thought money had freed her from me. What she didn't know was that it was already setting the stage for her fall. The restaurant glowed like something out of a magazine, dim lights, soft jazz, and polished marble floors that made every laugh echo longer than it should have. I was there because Laura insisted. "It's just dinner, Daniel," she said that morning, her tone clipped efficient. "You should come. People will ask questions otherwise." I didn't ask which people. I just put on my only navy blazer and showed up. She was already at the table when I arrived, surrounded by a half circle of faces I didn't recognize, friends from her new life. The kind that sip imported wine and measure worth by the label. The waiter pulled out a chair for me, but Laura barely looked up. "Oh, you made it," she said, like I'd interrupted something. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, taking the empty seat at the far end. The table was littered with crystal glasses, gold-rimmed plates, and laughter that felt rehearsed. One woman leaned toward Laura. "So, this is the famous husband we've heard so much about." Laura smirked, swirling her wine. "Famous might be too generous. Hard-working, though. He's a builder." A man in a tailored suit chuckled. "Ah, a practical man. Every queen needs a builder for her castle." The table burst into polite laughter. I smiled tightly and looked down at my water. The ice clinked louder than it should have. When the waiter brought the first course, Laura stood up, holding her glass high. "To new beginnings," she said. "To freedom, to growth, and to knowing your worth. Her voice carried just enough for everyone to hear. Someone shouted, "To Laura," glasses clinked. Then, from the end of the table, one of the men asked with a grin, "So where's your husband tonight?" Laura gestured lazily toward me. "Right here, but soon he'll just be part of my past." The laughter that followed felt like the room itself was laughing. My hand tightened around the glass. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words dissolved before they reached my mouth. When the applause ended, I set my drink down carefully and said, "You always did know how to make an exit." Laura turned toward me, her expression unreadable. "Don't be dramatic, Daniel. We're all adults here." The rest of the evening blurred into noise. People toasted, music played, and somewhere between dessert and goodbyes, I realized no one had looked at me once, not even her. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty, the night heavy with humidity. I caught up to her near her car, the red Tesla shining under the streetlights. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. She stopped, keys in hand. Doing what, acting like we never shared a life? Her lips curved into something between pity and annoyance. "Daniel, don't make this harder. I just woke up, that's all. Money changes perspective. Clarity or cruelty?" She shrugged, unlocking the door. Maybe both. Her taillights disappeared into the dark, leaving me standing in the reflection of my own silence. 2 days later, she invited her parents over. When I came home from work, their Mercedes was already in the driveway. I walked in to find all three of them sitting in the living room, like a board of directors ready to terminate an employee. "Daniel, Mr. Wilkerson began. "Laura tells us things have been tense." "I'd call it distant," I said. He cleared his throat. "She's in a transformative period. You must understand she needs to protect what's hers." "What's hers?" I repeated slowly. Laura folded her arms. "Dad's just saying we need to be practical. Things are changing. I'm changing." Mrs. Wilkerson smiled coldly. "It's nothing against you, dear, but when fortune arrives, so do opportunists." I stared at her. "You think I married your daughter for her money? We had nothing when we started." She shrugged. "And now she does." For a moment I felt something old and dangerous rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down, meeting Laura's eyes instead. "You really think I'd take from you?" She hesitated, just long enough to tell me the answer was yes. That night I packed a small suitcase. She didn't stop me. The kids stood at the top of the stairs, half awake, watching quietly. Ethan whispered, "Are you leaving, Dad?" I forced a smile, just for a little while. Laura didn't look up from her phone. It's for the best. I carried my bags down the hall, each step echoing like a nail in the floorboards I'd laid with my own hands years before. When I reached the front door, I turned once more. She was still scrolling, expression blank. I wanted to say something, maybe about love, maybe about loss, but what came out was simple. Take care of them. The door shut softly behind me. The motel room in Round Rock smelled of bleach and cheap air freshener. I set my bags down, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the muted TV. Outside, the neon sign flickered, painting the walls red and blue in alternating flashes. I wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly I felt hollow. For a week I went to work, came home to the same silence, and tried to convince myself it was temporary. But every night when I scrolled through social media, the evidence said otherwise. Laura's posts had become a highlight reel of luxury brunches at rooftop restaurants, designer dresses, her posing next to the Tesla champagne glasses raised with captions like, "Finally living my truth." Her friends flooded the comments, "You deserve this, so proud of you," and I just watched. Quietly, saving every post. Not out of jealousy, out of clarity. One evening, while I was drinking cold coffee from a paper cup, her brother Paul called. "Hey, man, you okay?" His voice was cautious. "Laura's been saying things. That you're bitter, maybe unstable." I let out a soft laugh. "Unstable? Yeah. She says you can't handle her success." I stared at the dark window, my reflection faint against the neon lights. "She's right about one thing," I said. "I can't handle what she's become." When the call ended, I sat there a long time, the hum of the fridge the only sound. A few nights later, I drove by the house. From the street, I could see the living room glowing with soft golden light. Through the window, Laura stood with a glass of wine, talking animatedly to someone on speakerphone. Her laughter floated out into the quiet night. She looked free. Or maybe just empty in a more expensive way. I didn't knock. I didn't even stop the engine. I just watched for a few seconds before driving away. Back at the motel, I sat down at the tiny desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen. Somewhere between pain and patience, something began to shift. I started keeping notes, dates, transactions, screenshots. Every small detail I could remember. Not because I planned revenge out of spite, but because I knew one day truth would need witnesses. She thought she'd erased me from her story. But I was still there quietly writing it down, line by line. On the last night of that month, I drove out to Lake Travis. The sky was clear, the water black and still. I parked near the dock and stood there, a long time breathing in the cold air. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. I looked out at the horizon and said it aloud, just once. "You'll see, Laura. Not everything that shines lasts." Then I turned back toward my truck, ready to start the slow work of rebuilding not my marriage, but myself. And this time, I wouldn't fix anything for someone else. I'd build something that could never be taken. The motel was quiet except for the hum of the old air conditioner and the occasional car passing on the highway. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pale blue walls, feeling the weight of the silence pressing against my chest. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from peace. It was the kind that waits. The kind that listens. Somewhere between the ache of betrayal and the sting of humiliation, that silence became my ally. The night I left, I promised myself one thing: I wouldn't let anger make me small. Laura could have her noise, her parties, her new friends, her loud freedom. I would fight differently, quietly, with precision. I woke early the next morning and brewed coffee in the small kitchenette. I scrolled through my phone, past photos of the kids, past old memories, until I reached the folder I'd made the night before evidence. Inside it were screenshots, Laura's Facebook posts, her purchase receipts, and the bank app we used for our joint Wells Fargo account. Every transaction had a story. Every withdrawal, a clue. Around noon, I called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Linda Ross, a lawyer, recommended to me back when a coworker went through a brutal divorce. She was known in Austin as the one person you hired when the other side thought they'd already won. "Ross and Associates," her assistant answered. "Daniel Cooper," I said. "I need to schedule a consultation. Family matter." 2 hours later, I was sitting in her office downtown. The blinds were half closed, sunlight cutting thin gold lines across a wall of framed degrees. Linda Ross was in her 50s, composed with sharp brown eyes that saw through politeness. "Tell me what's happening," she said. "My wife won the lottery," I said simply. "And now she's divorcing me." She leaned back. "That's new. Usually it's the other way around." I slid a folder across her desk, the prenuptial agreement I'd found in a cabinet before leaving the house. Her father had me sign this before the wedding. Linda opened it, flipping through with the speed of someone who'd read 1,000 like it. She stopped near the middle, tapping a finger on a section printed in smaller font. Section 4.2. I frowned. What about it? This clause here, any winnings, prizes, or financial gains acquired during marriage shall be considered marital property. My heart gave a slow, heavy thud. You mean? She looked up, smiling faintly. It means the thing her family thought would protect her might be the very thing that protects you. I sat back, trying to process the words. But the ticket was in her name. Linda nodded. Doesn't matter. If she used joint funds to buy it, it's part of the marital estate. And if I'm right, she's already making your case stronger with every dollar she spends. She's been spending plenty, I said quietly. Linda steepled her fingers. Then all we have to do is watch her do it. That night back at the motel, I opened my laptop again. The folder evidence became plan. I started collecting everything: statements, receipts, public posts. I even checked the lottery site. The winning ticket had been bought at a convenience store off Burnett Road, the same one where Laura stopped every Friday for coffee and gas. The purchase time matched a transaction on our joint debit card. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to control. The following days took on a rhythm. I'd go to work, handle my crew, then spend evenings at the motel piecing together timelines. The neon sign outside flickered vacant Y every few seconds, like a reminder that something was missing. But inside, I was building something new. Every Friday, I saw the kids. Ethan would ask, "Dad, are you moving back home soon?" And I'd smile. "Not yet, buddy. Grown-ups are figuring things out." Lily would hand me her drawings, stick figures of our family holding hands. Except lately, her mother's figure was drawn farther away. One Sunday afternoon, after dropping them back off, I stopped outside our old house. The Tesla was parked in the driveway next to a delivery truck, unloading designer furniture. Through the window, I saw Laura laughing with two women from her new circle. There were champagne glasses on the table. The sound of her laughter used to fill me with warmth. Now it was just an echo of everything I couldn't recognize. I didn't knock. I drove straight to Linda's office the next morning. She met me with coffee already waiting. "You look like a man who's made up his mind," she said. "I am," I replied. "What's next? We'll need full documentation. Joint account records for the last 2 years, any evidence of her using that account for lottery tickets, emails, photos, social media, anything showing her spending. The more she mixes those winnings with marital funds, the better." "She's doing that every day," I said. "Good," Linda replied. "Then she's digging her own hole." I couldn't help a small laugh. She always was good with design. For a moment, Linda's expression softened. "You still love her?" I stared at the window, watching sunlight catch the dust in the air. I loved the version of her that used to paint sunsets on our walls. "I don't know this woman now." Linda nodded. "Then let's focus on the version of you that deserves justice." That night, I drove to a small diner off the interstate. I met my friend Mark, a guy from the job site who'd called a few times since I left home. He listened quietly while I told him everything. "Man," he said, finally shaking his head, "she did you dirty. You should take her down." "I'm not taking anyone down," I said. "I'm just standing up again." He looked at me for a long moment, then raised his beer. "Then stand tall." Driving back, the city lights blurred in the rain. I thought about how anger used to make me reckless when I was young. How easy it was to shout, to swing, to prove. But this was different. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about building something unshakable. The next few weeks were a strange calm. I learned to live with the silence. It became my workshop. Every evening, I'd add new files to the folder: photos of Laura's Instagram posts, bank screenshots, timestamps. She was documenting her downfall in real time, and all I had to do was watch. One night, I sat on the motel balcony with a notebook in my lap. The highway hummed below. I wrote at the top of the page, "Truth doesn't need noise." It just needs time. That same night, Ethan called me. His voice was quiet. "Dad, Mom says you're mad at her." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm just waiting for her to remember what matters." "She doesn't come home much anymore," he said softly. I swallowed hard. "Take care of your sister." "Okay, I will." After the call, I stared out at the distant city skyline. Somewhere in one of those glowing buildings, Laura was laughing, dining, pretending she'd built herself from scratch. But the truth was simple. She'd built her new world on the foundation of our old one, and she didn't even know the cracks were already forming. A week later, Linda called. "I've reviewed the prenup thoroughly," she said. "It's airtight for you." They overreached Daniel. The clause they inserted to protect their assets now guarantees you half of hers. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Nothing yet," Linda said. "Let her keep spending. Let her document it all. The more public she is, the easier this gets." After we hung up, I leaned back on the motel bed, the glow of the streetlights spilling through the blinds. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. She thought she'd taken everything that mattered. But what she'd really done was hand me the one thing she could never buy back: leverage. I closed my eyes and whispered to the quiet room, "Patience, old friend. It's almost time." The next morning, the city was still wrapped in mist when I pulled into the parking lot of Linda's office. The sun hadn't broken through yet, and for once I didn't feel like a man running from something. I felt like someone heading toward it. Inside, the smell of coffee and paper filled the air. Linda sat at her desk, glasses low on her nose, reading through a folder thick with tabs and sticky notes. "You look rested," she said without looking up. "I didn't sleep," I replied. "Even better," she said, smiling faintly. "Rest is overrated. Read this." She slid a photocopy across the desk. It was the prenuptial agreement again, this time marked in blue ink and yellow highlights. I leaned closer, reading the small lines she'd circled. Section 4.2. Any winnings, prizes, or financial gains acquired during the marriage shall be considered marital property. I stared at it, then looked up. "That's been there all along." "Since the day you signed it," she said. "I went through it line by line. Whoever drafted this tried to be thorough, but they made one big mistake. They wanted to protect her family's money, not her future money. That clause covers everything she wins or earns while married to you." I rubbed a hand over my face. "You're saying the lottery is marital property?" Linda finished. "Legally, half of it is yours. In fact, she might owe you even more depending on how she spent it." I leaned back, trying to catch my breath. "She'll never see it that way." "She doesn't have to," Linda said calmly. "The court will." I let out a slow, disbelieving laugh. "Her father made me sign this. He called it protection." Linda took off her glasses, folding them carefully. "It still is, just not for the side he expected." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. My mind flicked back to that day in 2009, the wood-paneled office, Mr. Wilkerson's patronizing smile, Laura's nervous laughter. "It's just paperwork," she'd said. I was too in love, too proud, too stupid to read the fine print. And now that same arrogance, their arrogance, had built the weapon that would destroy them. Linda leaned forward. "I need you to do something for me, Daniel. Don't tell her you know. Let her keep believing you're harmless." "That won't be hard," I said. "She already thinks I'm invisible." "Good," Linda said. "Because invisibility wins wars." The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm of collection. Every document, every record I could find. Linda filed motions quietly, making sure no alarms went off. She moved like a chess player, patient, deliberate. I followed her lead. At night, when I wasn't at the motel, I'd drive around the city sometimes, ending up near our old neighborhood. The Wilkerson house sat behind high iron gates, lights glowing faintly through tall windows. From the street, it looked like a fortress. But I knew better now. Fortresses don't fail from outside attacks. They crumble from cracks within. On Friday evening, I met my friend Mark at a small bar on South Lamar. He looked at me over his beer. "You sure you want to go through with this? You could just take what she offers and walk away." I smiled faintly. "She hasn't offered me anything yet." "She will," he said. "Women like her always do when they realize what they've lost." "I'm not doing this for money," I said. He raised an eyebrow. Then why I thought about it for a moment. The sound of the jukebox hummed low in the background. "Because she took my respect," I said finally. "I want it back." Mark nodded slowly. "Then, make sure you win the right way." The following week, Linda called me back to her office. "You'll want to hear this," she said, handing me a document. It was an itemized spending report she'd compiled using public data and bank statements. In the last 60 days, Laura had spent nearly $1 million designer furniture cars, European travel deposits for property. The account used for nearly all of it, our joint checking. Linda tapped the report. "Every purchase she makes strengthens your case. It proves she's commingled the winnings with marital funds. When the judge sees this, there's no going back." I ran a finger down the list, stopping at one entry, the Westlake condo. $780,000. Paid in full. "She's really done it," I murmured. "She's making this easy," Linda said. "Her lawyer will try to argue that she used her own card, but the origin of the money traces back to your joint account. It's airtight." I sat back, letting the satisfaction settle in cold and clean. "What happens next?" Linda smiled. "Next, we wait. And when she's built her empire of glass, we'll show the court who paid for the foundation." That night, I stopped by a diner for dinner. The waitress poured me coffee, and I caught myself staring at the steam rising from the cup, thinking about all the years I'd spent just working, providing, trusting. Maybe that's what made this revenge feel different. It wasn't about destroying someone else's life. It was about reclaiming mine. Later, back at the motel, I opened the folder again. The prenup looked smaller than I remembered, just a few sheets of paper typed in careful legal language. But those words now carried the weight of every sleepless night. I took a pen and underlined the clause again. Section 4.2. The words shimmered faintly under the yellow light. It struck me then how strange justice could be, how sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be seen. The phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Laura, I hope you're okay. The kids miss you. Let's not make this ugly." I stared at the screen, then typed, "It won't be ugly." And it wouldn't be not in the way she imagined. The next morning, Linda called again. "I did some digging," she said. "Your father-in-law's attorney, the one who drafted the prenup, is the same man advising Laura now." I blinked. "You're kidding." "Nope. And guess what? He left the original language untouched. That clause is his own writing. If we play this right, he'll have to explain his own mistake in court." I couldn't help laughing, the sound sharper than I expected. He wrote his own downfall. "Pride makes people sloppy," Linda said. "That family is full of it." "Then let's use it," I said. For the first time in months, I slept soundly that night. The silence that used to suffocate me now felt like armor. Every sound, the cars outside, the creak of the old air conditioner, was just the world reminding me that I was still standing. Before bed, I wrote a note to myself on a scrap of paper and taped it to the mirror. "Stay patient. Stay quiet. Let them speak first." The next morning, I read it again and smiled. Laura had her luxury, her spotlight, her audience. I had something better, truth time, and a lawyer who knew exactly how to use both. And in a strange, poetic way, the contract that once made me feel small was about to become the blueprint of my freedom. When I turned out the lights, I whispered to the dark, "You built this, Laura." Every word of it. The first time I saw her face on the newsfeed again, it didn't hurt. It was almost funny. There she was, Laura Cooper, smiling under perfect lighting, holding a champagne flute beside Lake Travis, captioned, "Freedom tastes better when it's expensive." The picture had 300 likes and a dozen heart emojis. I stared at it for a long moment, then hit save. Every post was another brick in the wall she didn't know she was building. Every tag, every comment, every date was a nail sealing her story shut. Linda called it the digital trap. "She's not just flaunting her money," Linda said when I met her that Monday. "She's documenting evidence for us. Every purchase, every public appearance, it's all traceable." We sat in her office surrounded by folders, coffee cups, and the sound of quiet victory waiting to happen. She turned her monitor toward me. "See this? The condo she bought?" She tagged the developer's Instagram page. They shared it with the caption, "New homeowner Laura Cooper celebrates her lakefront purchase." It even lists the date of transfer. "That's your timeline, Daniel." "She's making our job effortless." I leaned forward, almost laughing. "She doesn't even realize she's testifying against herself." Linda smiled. "That's the beauty of ego. It can't shut up." The following week, my evenings became a routine of quiet observation. I'd come home from work, make dinner for one, sit down at my laptop, and open her social media. It felt strange at first, like spying, but then I remembered what Linda said. She made this public. You're just paying attention. There were endless photos. Laura at a rooftop party with her new circle of friends holding bottles of Dom Perignon. Laura in designer sunglasses captioned, "Hard work deserves luxury." Laura boarding a private jet, though I knew she didn't own one. "Borrowed image," Linda would say later, scrolling beside me. Sometimes I'd wonder who took the pictures. Then I'd remember it didn't matter. What mattered was the timestamps. Every post connected to a transaction. Every transaction linked to our joint account. "Keep saving everything," Linda reminded me. "Screenshots, receipts. Nothing disappears on the internet but courts like clean records." I created a separate folder on my desktop labeled Greed. It was full within a month. One Thursday evening, as I scrolled through yet another photo of Laura dining at an upscale restaurant downtown, Ethan called. His voice was quieter than usual. "Dad, Mom says she might not come to my game this weekend. She's got some event." I tried to keep my tone even. "That's okay, son. I'll be there. We'll grab dinner after." He hesitated. She seems different. Like she's not really listening when we talk." "I know," I said softly. "Just remember, that's not your fault." When we hung up, I stared at the empty motel wall for a long time. Laura had traded her family for an audience. But applause fades fast. That night, a message appeared on Facebook Messenger. A name I hadn't seen in years. Jenna Lee, one of Laura's old co-workers from the art school. "Hey, Daniel. I don't mean to pry, but I've seen what Laura's been posting. She's been telling people she used to buy tickets with your shared card for years. Thought you should know. Attached were screenshots of a group chat or a bragging. I played those same numbers with our joint card every Friday. Persistence pays off." I stared at the screen until the lines blurred. Then I forwarded it to Linda. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "This is gold. We'll use it when the time comes." She's confirming the marital fund herself. For the first time in months, I felt something close to satisfaction. A week later, Linda called me in. Her office had changed. The whiteboard behind her desk was now covered with a timeline, photos, receipts, dates, connecting lines drawn in red marker. At the top, the Cooper case. She handed me a flash drive. Every transaction, every purchase, every post she's made since the win, it's all mapped out. When the court sees this, there won't be much left to argue. I scrolled through the files on the screen. It was surreal, the $780,000 condo transfer, the $92,000 Mercedes GLE, purchased the Europe trip with first-class tickets paid through our joint account, the $15,000 weekend at the St. Regis. Her vanity had a paper trail a mile long. "She's not hiding anything," I said. Linda shook her head. "That's what makes it so powerful. She's showing the world exactly who she's become." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. The sky outside was warm and bright, the kind of blue that makes you believe in second chances. That night, I cooked dinner for Ethan and Lily at the motel kitchenette, boxed mac and cheese, grilled chicken. They didn't mind the simplicity. Ethan told me about his baseball game. Lily showed me the drawing she'd made of the three of us. Laura wasn't in the picture. "Mom's always busy," Lily said. "She says money makes her tired." I didn't correct her. After dropping them off at Laura's condo later that night, I sat in the car for a while, engine running, headlights off. Through the tall windows, I could see her hosting another dinner party, laughter spilling out like music. For a second, I wondered if she'd ever feel what she'd lost, or if she was too high above it to notice. The next morning, Linda called with an update. "We're almost ready to file," she said. But I want her to hang herself a little more first. "Have you checked her Instagram today?" I opened it. The newest post showed Laura standing on a yacht, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "To independence and to never looking back." I stared at it, then took a screenshot. She's looking back more than she realizes. Linda laughed. "Good. Keep watching. The storm's coming." That night, the kids called again. Ethan sounded worried. "Mom said people online are being mean to her. Someone commented that she's changed." "She has," I said quietly. "Do you think she'll change back?" I hesitated. Sometimes people only change when they lose what they thought they couldn't. After the call, I sat by the window with the light off. Rain streaked down the glass, and I could see my reflection, faintly older. Steadier, quieter. I realized revenge wasn't something I was chasing anymore. It was something that was already unfolding, one careless post at a time. By the end of that month, the folder greed had grown to nearly 200 files. Screenshots, bank records, public mentions, even a video clip from a local magazine segment where Laura said, "I always believed success was just a matter of time." The interviewer had laughed. "Your husband must be proud," she'd answered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He was supportive once, but some people prefer building walls to building dreams. When Linda saw that clip, she smiled like a chess player moving her queen. "Perfect," she said. "Defamation won't look good next to proof that she used your joint account." That evening, I received another email from her with the subject line, "Ready to file." It was short, precise, final. "Daniel, everything's in place. The paperwork will be served next week. Once this goes public, stay quiet. The truth will speak louder than you ever could." I closed the laptop and sat there in the glow of the screen, feeling the air shift around me. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the lake. I picked up my phone and opened her Instagram one last time. Another post had gone up. Laura raising her glass, her caption glowing like irony itself. "To independence." I saved it without smiling. "She thought money freed her," I whispered to the empty room. "But freedom's just another word for being unbound by what matters." Then I turned off the light and waited for the storm to begin. The morning of Ethan's career day dawned crisp and bright. The kind of spring day that smelled faintly of cut grass and fresh asphalt. I ironed my only clean shirt, the pale blue one, with a small tear near the cuff, and slipped on my work boots. The kids were excited. Ethan had asked if I could come speak to his class about construction. "You build stuff, Dad," he'd said. "That's cool." I arrived at the school early, parked my old Ford F-150 beside a row of shiny SUVs, and carried my tool belt slung over my shoulder. The auditorium buzzed with laughter and chatter as parents filed in. The tables were lined with posters, bankers, nurses, software engineers, and one guy who sold real estate in a cowboy hat. I felt out of place, but proud. Then the air changed. The sound of an expensive engine outside made a few heads turn. Through the glass doors, Laura stepped in wearing a cream-colored dress and sunglasses, her heels clicking like applause. She carried a gift bag in one hand and her purse in the other. Behind her, the Mercedes GLE gleamed under the sun. I didn't have to ask why she was here. Of course she would come now when there was an audience. "Laura," a teacher exclaimed. "So glad you could join us." "Wouldn't miss it," she said smoothly, removing her glasses. "My son deserves to see what success looks like." Ethan's face froze between pride and embarrassment. He gave her a weak smile. I stayed at my table pretending to arrange my tools. She walked over, perfume filling the space, before her words did. "You look practical," she said, glancing at my work shirt. "Someone has to be," I replied quietly. She gave a polite laugh and turned toward a group of mothers. "It's sweet, isn't it? He still loves his hands-on work." I watched her from the corner of my eye, all grace and charm, as if she hadn't gutted our home with her absence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the class and said, "Building takes patience. Whether it's a house or a family, what matters most is the foundation." The words came out steadier than I felt. Laura sat in the second row, scrolling through her phone. After I finished, the kids clapped politely. Then it was her turn. "Hi, everyone," she began, voice smooth and rehearsed. "I'm Laura Cooper. Some of you may know me from the news or my art classes at the college. I wanted to talk about what happens when you take risks and win." She smiled as if she were auditioning for a commercial. "Life is about knowing your worth," she continued. "Sometimes that means changing paths, no matter who tries to hold you back." The parents murmured approval. I could feel the blood rising in my ears. Ethan's shoulders slumped. When the event ended, the applause echoed through the gym. Laura basked in it. I waited until the crowd thinned before approaching her outside by the parking lot. "You didn't have to make this about you," I said quietly. She turned expression cool. "Everything I do is about the kids." "Then maybe try showing up for them more than once a month." Her jaw tightened. "Don't lecture me, Daniel. You chose your version of life. I chose mine. Mine includes being there when our son needs me." She gave a thin smile. So noble. But noble doesn't pay for college. She stepped into the driver's seat and shut the door before I could reply. The Mercedes pulled away in silence, its reflection flashing across my windshield. That afternoon, Ethan barely spoke on the ride home. I stopped at a small diner for milkshakes, hoping to lighten the mood. We sat in a booth by the window, the light turning amber as the sun dropped. "Your mom looked nice today," I said. He stared at his glass. She looked like someone else. I didn't answer. Later that week, Laura texted me, "Let's all have dinner Friday. The kids miss us together." The message felt out of character, but I agreed. I figured she wanted to stage another performance, maybe soothe her guilt after the career day fiasco. We met at a new restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, candles, the kind of place where silence costs extra. Laura was already there waving as if nothing had ever happened. The kids sat between us. She ordered wine before the waiter could hand out menus. "I thought we could be civil," she said lightly. "I've always been civil," I said. She ignored the jab and turned to Ethan. "Your teacher said your presentation went well." He shrugged. "Dad helped." "Well, that's nice," she said, sipping her drink. "Maybe someday you'll build something like he does." "I'd rather build something that lasts," Ethan replied. The words made her pause, but she brushed it off with a laugh. You've been spending too much time with your father. Dinner went on like that small talk that cracked in all the wrong places. I tried to steer it toward the kids' school projects, Lily's drawings, Ethan's baseball. Laura kept slipping back into conversations about travel plans and new opportunities. When dessert came, she raised her glass. Let's celebrate how far we've all come. Ethan set down his spoon. Mom, he said softly, if money makes people happy, why are you never home anymore? The question hit the table like dropped glass. Laura froze her fork clattering onto the plate. The sound was sharp enough to silence the whole restaurant for a breath. Her lips parted, but no words came. Ethan looked down, embarrassed. I just miss when we all used to eat together. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. The silence that followed did the work for me. Laura's eyes glistened. She reached for her napkin, pressing it to her mouth, as if to stop the trembling. The waiter came to refill water, realized the tension, and quietly retreated. Lily tugged her mother's sleeve. Mommy Laura blinked hard, forcing a smile. I'm fine, sweetheart. But her voice cracked on the last word. After dinner, the kids went to wait by the hostess stand while we settled the bill. Laura's hands shook slightly as she signed the check. You don't get it, Daniel, she whispered. You always make me the villain. I don't have to, I said. You're doing that on your own. She stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. You won't win this. Maybe not in money, I said. But I've already won where it counts. When we walked outside, the night air was warm and thick with the scent of rain. The kids climbed into my truck. Laura lingered by her car, head tilted back, eyes closed as if praying for a way out of herself. As I drove away, Ethan watched her through the rear window until she disappeared into the glow of traffic. We rode in silence for a while. Then he said quietly, Dad, I didn't mean to make her cry. I know, I said. But sometimes the truth sounds like pain before it feels like healing. At the next red light, he looked at me. Do you still love her? I thought about the question longer than I should have. I love the parts of her that still live in you and Lily, I said finally. That's enough. When we got home, I tucked the kids in and sat alone by the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, soft and steady. I reached for my phone. A new email waited from Linda. The subject line read, Ready to file. I closed my eyes and exhaled. The time for silence was over. All right, I whispered into the quiet room. Let's move. The envelope was thick, crisp, and official. A man in a navy suit stood at Laura's door, holding it out. Mrs. Cooper, you've been served. She froze, a smile half formed on her lips from whatever call she'd just ended. I'm sorry, what petition for divorce and equitable distribution of assets, the man said, polite but practiced. Sign here, please. The pen scratched against the paper. Her signature looked smaller than usual. When she tore the envelope open, the heading in bold letters stared back at her. In the District Court of Travis County, Texas, Daniel Cooper v. Laura Wilkerson Cooper. Her breath caught. She dropped the papers on the table, scattering receipts and champagne corks across the marble surface. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Linda. It's done, she said simply. I looked out at the job site where my crew was laying new concrete, the sun glaring off the steel beams. Then we wait. No, she said. Now we watch. That evening, Laura's call came through. I didn't answer. The voicemail played later in my truck, her voice sharp with disbelief. Daniel, this is insane. You can't actually think you're entitled to my winnings. You didn't even buy the ticket. Then softer, brittle, please don't do this. I deleted the message. Within a day, the Wilkersons had convened at their Westlake mansion. Laura sat at the long dining table with her parents and her brother, the same setting where years ago we'd toasted our engagement. Mr. Wilkerson slammed his fist against the table. "He's bluffing. The prenup protects you. That's what we wrote it for." Mrs. Wilkerson nodded sharply. "We'll call Morrison. He handled the Crawfords' estate. He can end this fast." Laura rubbed her temples. "I just don't understand how he—" Her father cut her off. "You underestimated him. That's the problem. But it doesn't matter. Money buys better lawyers." When Morrison arrived the next morning, he carried the confidence of someone used to winning. Tailored suit Rolex watched the kind of smile that promised destruction. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, shaking Laura's hand, "we'll put this to rest quickly. Your husband is trying to exploit a loophole. We'll make him regret it." Laura nodded, clinging to that reassurance like a lifeline. But by the following afternoon, she was pacing her condo, scrolling through headlines. News sites had already picked it up: lottery marriage turns legal. Photos of her holding the winning ticket splashed across screens. The caption beneath read, "Spouse claims half of 9.8 NT winnings under prenup clause." She threw the phone onto the couch. Meanwhile, in Linda's office, I sat across from her as she laid out the plan. "They'll try to frame you as opportunistic," she said. "They'll say you're after her success. Let them. What matters is the documentation. The prenup clause is explicit, and the financial records are irrefutable. Keep calm, keep quiet." I nodded. "I've been practicing that for months." She smiled. "Good. Silence is your weapon." The first court hearing was set for mid-April. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. Rows of benches filled with spectators and reporters. I wore my only decent suit, the same one from our wedding. It still fit, though, a little tighter around the shoulders. Laura arrived with Morrison and her parents, their entrance loud, with designer heels and whispered confidence. She didn't look at me. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Morrison began with an opening that dripped condescension. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is about a man attempting to claim what he never earned. My client, Mrs. Cooper, purchased her winning lottery ticket independently, using her personal funds guided by her own intuition." He paused for effect, letting his voice fill the courtroom. "The idea that Mr. Cooper is owed half of this fortune is absurd and insulting to the notion of personal effort and luck." He gestured toward me. "This is not a case of shared work or partnership. This is opportunism dressed as fairness." The judge nodded slowly, jotting notes. Morrison smiled like a man who'd already tasted victory. Then it was Linda's turn. She rose calmly, her voice even. "Your Honor, the defense speaks of personal effort. We'll speak of documented fact. Exhibit A, Section 4.2 of the prenuptial agreement drafted and signed by both parties." She read aloud, clear and unwavering, "Any winnings, prizes, or financial gains acquired during marriage shall be considered marital property." The courtroom shifted. Linda continued, "The very contract their family insisted on now protects my client." Mrs. Cooper herself confirmed in multiple statements, including public interviews, that she has been purchasing lottery tickets for years using their joint account. "We have the receipts, Your Honor." Literally. Morrison's confident smirk faltered. Judge Henderson leaned forward. "You have proof of joint account use." Linda handed over a folder. "Yes, ma'am." "Weekly purchases for Powerball tickets drawn directly from their shared Wells Fargo account, ending in 4721. The judge flipped through, brow furrowing. Morrison cleared his throat. "Your Honor, those purchases were insignificant casual. The winnings were," Linda cut in smoothly, "significant enough to buy a Mercedes, a condo, and a social media following built on marital funds." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Laura's mother whispered sharply to her husband. He looked pale. The judge turned to Morrison. "You'll need to respond to these documents formally." He nodded, jaw tight. "Understood, Your Honor." The session adjourned early, leaving the hallway buzzing with reporters. I kept my head down, walking past flashing cameras. Someone called out, "Mr. Cooper, how does it feel to fight for half of a fortune I didn't stop walking?" "Feels like justice," I said. That night, Laura called again. This time I answered. "You made this public," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to me?" "Only what you already did to yourself," I said. "You think you're noble, don't you? You're still that humble worker who thinks patience wins." "Let me tell you something. Patience doesn't pay bills." I hesitated, then said, "Maybe not. But it pays attention." She hung up. 2 days later, Linda forwarded me an email from Morrison's office, an early settlement offer. $1.2 million to walk away clean. I stared at the number. For a moment, the practical part of me considered it. Then I heard Laura's voice again. "I don't need you anymore." I replied to Linda Decline. "We're not finished." The next hearing came quickly. Morrison tried to recover ground, waving legal precedent around like a weapon. But Linda dismantled him, point by point. Each time he raised his voice, she lowered hers, forcing him to chase her calm. At one point she said, "Your Honor, my client isn't asking for more than the law allows. He's asking for what's rightfully his under the very agreement drafted by his in-laws. If there is exploitation here, it's not from the man who kept his vows. It's from those who mistook loyalty for weakness." Even the reporters stopped typing for a moment. By the time we left court that afternoon, Morrison's jaw was set tight enough to crack glass. Laura brushed past me without a word, her perfume trailing like the ghost of something long dead. Outside, Linda looked up at the cloudy Austin sky. "They'll regroup," she said. "They'll throw everything at us next time." "I know," I said. "Are you ready?" I nodded. "I've been ready since the day she said she didn't need me." Linda smiled faintly. "Then it's time to show her what need really looks like." We parted ways in the parking lot. I drove back to my motel, the weight in my chest lighter than it had been in months. The city lights blurred past the windshield, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. The storm had started, yes, but it was my kind of storm. Quiet. Precise. I didn't need lightning or thunder. All I needed was the truth. And the truth finally was on my side. The courthouse was packed before the clock struck 9. Reporters lined the hallway, their cameras flashing at every familiar face. A few of them recognized Laura, whispering her name, like she was still the woman from the lottery photo, glamorous, invincible. But that photo was fading fast. The months of court filings, the interviews, the headlines had drained the shine out of her. When she walked past me in her white blazer, she didn't look at me, but I saw her hand tremble slightly as she smoothed her hair. I stood quietly beside Linda at the plaintiff's table. She adjusted her glasses, calm as ever, her yellow legal pad filled with neat lines of notes. "Remember," she said softly, "don't react to anything. Let them unravel on their own." Judge Patricia Henderson entered, her robe flowing like a warning. "Court is now in session for Cooper versus Cooper," she announced. "Mr. Morrison, you may begin." The man stood straightening his $1,000 suit. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a case of greed masquerading as fairness." His voice carried confidence. His arrogance filled the room. My client, Mrs. Laura Cooper, purchased the winning ticket using her own funds, her own numbers, her own initiative. Her husband, Mr. Cooper, contributed nothing to that act of luck. He simply wants half of something he had no part in earning. He turned toward the jury, smiling slightly. "We all value partnership, Your Honor, but this This is opportunism. A man scorned trying to rewrite fortune into entitlement. The words echoed through the courtroom like poison wrapped in politeness. Then Linda stood. No grand gestures, no theatrics. Just her voice steady, sharp, and unshakable. Your Honor, the defense wants to discuss luck. I want to discuss law. She lifted a page from the prenup. Section 4.2 of this agreement, drafted and signed by both parties, states, and I quote, "Any winnings, prizes, or financial gains acquired during marriage shall be considered marital property." She let the silence sit. The paper in her hand caught the light like a weapon. This document was not written by my client. It was written by Mrs. Cooper's own family attorney. Judge Henderson's eyebrow twitched. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Linda continued, her tone measured but merciless. The same clause they added to protect their assets now ensures that the lottery winnings acquired during marriage belong equally to both spouses. Morrison stepped forward. Your Honor, that clause was never intended to include life-altering amounts like a $9.8 million jackpot. Clearly, it was meant for trivial winnings, a raffle ticket, a casino voucher. Linda cut him off smoothly. The clause doesn't say trivial. It says any. The law does not adjust its meaning based on the number of zeros involved. A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the spectators. The judge allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. Linda turned back to her table, picking up a folder. And since my learned colleague wants to discuss contributions, let's examine the evidence of who actually paid for the winning ticket. She opened the folder and placed several documents on the table before the judge. Bank records from Wells Fargo joint account ending in 4721. Withdrawals every Friday morning for Powerball tickets. The same pattern continued for years. The winning ticket was purchased October 3rd, Friday, at 4:16 p.m. at the Quick Mart on Burnett Road. Payment processed on that same joint account. Laura's head snapped up. I saw her eyes flick toward Morrison, who froze. Linda's voice stayed calm. We also have screenshots from Mrs. Cooper's own social media posts referencing our weekly lottery tradition, including a comment dated September 30th. Still playing our lucky numbers, someday it'll happen. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the records. I see. Proceed. Morrison cleared his throat. Even if that were true. Your Honor, the ticket was in her name. Linda didn't miss a beat. That's irrelevant under Texas marital law, which defines any asset acquired during marriage and purchased with joint funds as community property. The name on the ticket doesn't outweigh the origin of the money. The tension in the room thickened. Morrison shifted again, his composure beginning to crack. Then Linda said, "But there's more." She clicked her remote, and the courtroom screen flickered to life images from Laura's own Instagram account. The new Mercedes, the lakefront condo, the European vacation. Every one of these purchases, Linda said, was made using the same joint account. She spent from what she believed to be her private fortune, not realizing she was proving our case. The gallery erupted into whispers. Laura's mother covered her mouth. Her father's face drained of color. Your Honor. Morrison protested, "These are irrelevant to ownership of the winnings." Linda's voice sliced through his objection. They are entirely relevant. They demonstrate commingling of assets, willful disregard for the prenup's conditions, and financial behavior that confirms the winnings were treated as shared property until this divorce was filed. Judge Henderson raised a hand. Enough. I've heard sufficient evidence. We'll take a brief recess before closing arguments. The gavel hit. Reporters spilled into the hallway like vultures. Laura turned to Morrison, her voice a whisper that still carried across the quiet courtroom. You said this was airtight. He didn't answer. His jaw locked, his pen trembling slightly between his fingers. Linda leaned toward me. Watch this, she murmured. He's about to bury himself. When court resumed, Morrison tried to regain control. Your Honor, Even if my client's actions were imprudent, this was never the intention of the agreement. Linda stood interrupting. Your Honor, may I read from Mr. Morrison's own filing submitted November 19th of last year? The judge nodded. Linda held up the document. Quote, the lottery ticket in question was purchased during the marriage using funds from the marital estate. A wave of silence fell. Morrison blinked. That was a clerical oversight. Linda smiled faintly. A clerical oversight you signed under penalty of perjury. He swallowed. Yes, but... The judge leaned forward. Are you admitting that the ticket was purchased with marital funds? Morrison's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. Your Honor, Linda said I rest my case. It took less than 10 minutes for the verdict. Judge Henderson adjusted her glasses, her voice calm and clear. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that the lottery winnings were indeed acquired during the marriage purchased with marital funds and thus constitute community property. Per Section 4.2 of the prenuptial agreement, Mr. Cooper is entitled to 50% of the net winnings. The gavel struck once. This court is adjourned. The room erupted, reporters scribbling notes, spectators murmuring. Laura sat frozen, her face pale mascara smudging as her hands trembled in her lap. Her father slumped in his seat. Morrison gathered his papers in silence, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I didn't move. I just breathed. Slowly, deeply. Linda leaned over, whispering, justice served, exactly as written. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. Outside the courthouse, the press surrounded me. Microphones shoved close. Mr. Cooper, how does it feel to win? Someone once shouted. I looked up at the sky, bright and cloudless, and said quietly, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like balance. That evening, I drove out to the edge of Lake Travis, where the water was still. The last streaks of sunset glowed across the horizon. I sat there watching the colors shift, thinking about every moment that led to this one. The laughter, the betrayal, the quiet nights in the motel. She'd thought money could free her from me. But it wasn't money that bound us in the first place. It was the life we built together, brick by brick, word by word. And in the end, she was the one who tore it down. I stayed until the stars came out. When I finally stood, the night was clear and silent. Somewhere across the lake, a light flickered in one of the condos, hers maybe. I turned toward the truck, smiling faintly. Let her keep her freedom, I said to no one. I'll keep my peace. The restaurant was expensive enough that the parking lot smelled like perfume and fresh leather. Inside, every table shimmered beneath low-hanging lights, the kind that made everything look better than it was. Laura had chosen the place, of course. She said it was time to be adults again. When I arrived, she was already seated, wearing a dark emerald dress that caught the light like water. Across from her sat Ethan and Lily, both dressed neatly, uncertain smiles on their faces. It was the first time we'd all been in the same room since the verdict. Daniel, Laura said smoothly, as if my name were something to practice. You look... Well, I'm here for them, I said. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she motioned to the waiter. Let's just enjoy tonight, for the kids. Dinner began quietly. Lily talked about her art project at school. Ethan described his baseball practice. I asked questions, nodded, kept my eyes mostly on them. But Laura, she performed. Every gesture was deliberate, every laugh slightly too loud. I realized she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the image she wanted to rebuild. Halfway through the meal, a family at another table recognized her. Aren't you the lady who won the lottery? The woman asked, smiling politely. Laura's eyes flickered, the smile tightening. That was a long time ago, she said lightly. Ethan's gaze dropped to his plate. I saw his jaw clench. After they left, silence stretched. She filled it with wine. "It's strange," she said, finally. "Everyone thinks money solves everything. Turns out it just changes the kind of problems you have." "Like losing people who used to trust you?" I asked, softly. Her fork paused midway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, eyes flashing. "You think you're the victim in all this?" "No," I said. "Just the one who stayed when things got quiet." Her lips parted like she wanted to fire back, but Ethan spoke before she could. "Can we not fight?" His voice cracked slightly the way teenagers sound when they're trying to be men. "We're not fighting," Laura said quickly, too quickly. "We're just talking." The waiter came refilling glasses, bringing dessert menus we didn't need. Laura ordered another glass of wine anyway. When it arrived, she raised it high. "To new beginnings," she said. "For all of us." Ethan stared at her. "Mom," he said quietly, "if money freed you, why are you never home anymore?" The room seemed to freeze. The fork in Laura's hand slipped, clattering onto the plate with a sharp metallic ring. A few people turned their heads from nearby tables. Laura blinked as if trying to understand the words. What Ethan didn't flinch. "You said money gave you freedom. But we hardly see you. You're always busy or gone. If you're so free, why don't you act like it?" The silence after that felt endless. Lily looked from her brother to her mother, wide-eyed. The waiter froze mid-step before quietly backing away. Laura's face went pale. She reached for her napkin, dabbing at her mouth, even though there was nothing there. "Ethan," she whispered, "that's not fair." He didn't look away. "It's not fair that you left." Her throat tightened. "I didn't leave. I just chose something else," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to me. For the first time in a long time, there was no defiance in them. Only something fragile, something that looked a lot like fear. Lily's voice was small. "Mom, are you mad?" "No," Laura said quickly, blinking hard. "No, baby, I'm not mad." She tried to smile, but it collapsed halfway. "I just didn't expect that question." Ethan crossed his arms, leaning back. Neither did we. The rest of the meal passed in uneasy silence. The sound of silverware from other tables filled the space between us. Laura barely touched her food. When the check came, I reached for it, but she shook her head. "I'll pay," she said. "I owe you that much." "You owe them more," I replied, nodding toward the kids. Her hand froze over her purse. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the smell of rain. The valet brought Laura's car first. She hugged Lily, kissed Ethan's cheek, and turned to me. "I wanted this to be nice," she said softly. "I thought maybe we could be something normal again." "Normal doesn't live in a courtroom," I said. "And it doesn't live in guilt." She flinched. "You really hate me, don't you?" "No," I said. "I don't have the energy for hate anymore." She looked like she wanted to say something, but the valet opened her door and she slipped inside. The car pulled away quietly. The drive home was long and quiet. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. Ethan stared out at the highway lights. After a while, he said, "I didn't mean to hurt her." "You didn't," I said. "You just told the truth." She looked lost. "She's been lost for a long time," I said. "She just didn't know until now." When we got home, I tucked Lily into bed. Ethan lingered in the doorway, still thoughtful. "Dad, yeah. Do you think she'll ever come back?" "Not to live here, but back to who she was?" I looked at him for a long moment. Maybe, but some people have to lose everything before they remember what matters. He nodded, his eyes older than they should have been. "Night, Dad. Night, son." After they went to bed, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. The kind of quiet I'd learned to live with had changed. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. The rain started after midnight, tapping softly against the glass. I thought about Laura's face when Ethan asked that question about the fork falling, the sudden silence. All her words, her rehearsed smiles, her polished image, none of it mattered in that moment. All that was left was the truth. She'd built her life on noise, but it was her own child's voice, calm, honest, that shattered it. I thought about calling Linda, telling her how the dinner went, but decided against it. Some victories don't belong in legal files. Some are just meant to be felt. Outside, the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement. I could still picture Laura sitting in her car somewhere, maybe parked under the same rain, replaying that question over and over in her head. If money freed you, why are you never home anymore? Maybe that was the only sentence that could reach her, the one that didn't come from anger or revenge, but from the innocence she'd abandoned. I sat there until the rain stopped. The air smelled clean, the kind of smell that comes after a storm when everything feels reset. Upstairs, I could hear Ethan turning in his bed, Lily's soft breathing. I whispered to the quiet house, freedom isn't about leaving. It's about staying true. Then I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle around me like a blanket. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel like I was waiting for justice anymore. I'd already seen it served, not by a judge, but by a child's question that no amount of wealth could answer. The sky was clear the morning the verdict came down, a soft blue stretching over Austin like it had been washed clean. I arrived at the courthouse, early, coffee in hand, the same navy suit pressed and worn at the edges. The halls were quieter than before, no crowd of reporters. This time no flashbulbs, just the sound of shoes on tile and the rustle of papers. Laura was already there, sitting beside her attorney. She looked smaller somehow. The perfect posture she'd always carried had softened. Her hair, once immaculate, was pulled back too tightly, and there were faint lines under her eyes. When she glanced at me, her gaze held no anger, only exhaustion. Linda leaned over. "Don't say a word unless the judge addresses you directly," she murmured. "I won't," I said. "I've said everything I needed to already." At 9 sharp, Judge Henderson entered, robes flowing as she took her seat. The gavel struck once. "We are here to deliver judgment in Cooper versus Cooper." The silence that followed was the kind that felt alive. She looked over her glasses at the room. After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and the prenuptial agreement submitted, this court finds that the lottery winnings in question were purchased with marital funds and thus constitute community property under Texas law. Laura's eyes fluttered closed as if bracing for impact. The judge continued. "Accordingly, the court awards Mr. Daniel Cooper 50% of the net winnings, totaling $4.9 million. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder in a closed room. Laura's breath caught quiet but sharp. Morrison's pen dropped onto his notepad. I didn't move. My hands stayed clasped on the table, my heartbeat steady. Judge Henderson wasn't finished. Furthermore, Mrs. Cooper is ordered to liquidate assets as necessary to satisfy this distribution within 60 days. And just like that, it was over. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, chairs scraping against the floor as people rose. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the polished wood in front of me. Linda put a hand on my shoulder. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You earned this." "Feels strange," I murmured. "Justice often does." Outside, the reporters were waiting again, though fewer this time. A young woman from Channel 8 shoved a microphone toward me. "Mr. Cooper, how does it feel to win?" I thought about the question for a second, then answered quietly. "It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like balance." She blinked, unsure how to follow up. Linda guided me past her toward the parking lot. When I stepped into the sunlight, it hit different, warm, forgiving. The courthouse doors closed behind me, and I knew I wouldn't walk through them again. 2 weeks later, a wire transfer appeared in my account, 4905 to 31219. The numbers didn't bring joy. They brought stillness. I stared at them for a long time, then closed the laptop. That afternoon, I met Linda one last time. She handed me a folder. "This closes everything officially," she said. "No appeals." They accepted the ruling. "What about Laura?" I asked. Linda sighed. "She's liquidating. Condo, Mercedes, designer assets. I heard her father pulled out of a few partnerships to cover the loss. They'll recover financially, but reputations take longer." I nodded. "They'll survive. They always do." Linda studied me for a second. "What will you do now, build?" I said simply. "That's what I know how to do." 2 months later, I did just that. I bought a small construction company from a retiring contractor in Cedar Park. The sign above the office read, "Cooper Build and Restore." I started small, 5 employees, a single truck, a handful of tools. By the end of the year, we had 38 workers and contracts across 3 counties. Affordable housing, schools, repairs for veterans. It felt right, like redemption through labor. Some days, Ethan joined me after school, handing me nails or holding a flashlight while I checked blueprints. Lily came by on weekends, drawing on scrap wood with markers. We weren't rich. We were steady. One late afternoon, while I was packing up the job site, I heard a voice behind me. "You're hard to find these days." I turned. Laura stood by the gate, her hair tied loosely. No makeup, no designer, anything. Just jeans and a gray sweater. She looked human again. "I wasn't hiding," I said. "I know," she replied. "I just didn't know where to look." We stood there in silence for a long moment, the hum of construction equipment fading into the distance. She took a breath. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry." "For what part?" I asked quietly. "For all of it. The pride, the things I said. The way I treated you like you were less because you didn't need to shine the way I did." I studied her face. "You finally learned the difference between light and glare." Her eyes filled, but she smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." I nodded toward her car. "You rebuilding too? I'm working for my dad's company again," she said. "Not management. Just accounting." "That's a start?" She hesitated, then looked up at me. "Are you happy?" I thought about it, looking around at the half-built homes, the sound of hammers, the smell of cedar and dust. "Yeah," I said. "For the first time in a long while." "I'm glad," she whispered. "You deserve that." She started to turn away, then stopped. "Ethan said you told him something once. That respect lasts longer than love." I didn't understand it then. And now, she met my eyes. Now I do. When she drove off, I stood there for a while, the setting sun painting everything gold. That night, Ethan and Lily helped me put up a new sign at the office. The paint wasn't perfect, the letters uneven, but it was ours. "Think Mom will see it?" Ethan asked. "She will," I said. "And that's enough." He smiled. "You think she's okay? I think she's learning what okay really means." We packed up the tools as twilight settled. The air smelled like rain and sawdust, my favorite combination. Later, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch watching the lights across the hills. Somewhere out there, Laura was probably doing the same, sitting alone, wondering how something as simple as a ticket could unravel and rebuild 2 lives at once. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate is just another kind of chain, and I'd cut enough of those loose already. I took out a small notebook I kept in my jacket pocket, the one where I wrote notes to myself. At the top of a clean page, I scribbled, "Justice is quiet. It doesn't roar. It settles." The night around me was still. Crickets hummed in the grass. I looked up at the stars, thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd rebuilt, and whispered, balance restored. And for the first time in years, I felt completely free. The mornings had started to feel lighter. Maybe it was the season changing, or maybe it was me. 1 year after the verdict, I woke up before sunrise, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan spinning above my bed. I walked to the mirror, the same one from the old house I'd taken with me when everything else fell apart. My reflection stared back, older, steadier lines around the eyes, deeper than before. But there was peace in them now. The man I saw wasn't the one Laura left behind. He was the man who'd learned that dignity doesn't come from being loved, but from refusing to let loss define you. Downstairs, the coffee pot sputtered to life. The smell filled the kitchen. Outside, the sky was turning from violet to gold. I stepped onto the porch, mug in hand, watching the first light spread across the street. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was earned. The sound of small feet came behind me. Morning, Dad. Ethan said, his hair messy, still half asleep. Morning, champ. You're up early? Big day, he said, yawning. You promised I could help at the site. I smiled. You remember everything, don't you? That's what you always say, builders do. We drove to the construction site just as the crew was starting. The smell of sawdust and wet concrete hit the air. I showed him how to measure out the wooden frames for a foundation. Every strong home starts here, I said, drawing a chalk line on the board. He nodded. Like people. Exactly like people. By mid-morning, the sun was high and bright. We stopped for water under the half-built frame of what would be a small 3-bedroom house for a retired veteran and his wife. You think they'll like it? Ethan asked. They'll love it, I said. Because it'll be theirs, built with care. He grinned, then asked, Did you ever think you'd have your own company? I thought for a moment. I used to dream about big things, houses, success, but now I think the best dream is just to make something that lasts, even if no one notices but you. He nodded, taking that in with the seriousness only a 14-year-old could have. That afternoon when we returned home, there was a small envelope in the mailbox. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold, Laura. Inside was a short letter. Daniel, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. You were right. Money freed me from things that never mattered, but it also freed you from me. And maybe that's what was meant to happen. I'm trying to rebuild too in my own way. I hope the kids know how lucky they are to have you. Please tell them I'm proud of them. Laura. The paper trembled in my hand. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, before setting it down on the kitchen counter. For a moment, all I could do was breathe. There wasn't bitterness in her words, just understanding. The storm had finally passed. That night, I didn't reply. Some things don't need an answer. Some silences carry their own closure. Weeks later, I met Linda for coffee. She'd become more than a lawyer by now. She was a friend. You've built quite the business, she said, stirring her drink. 3 new contracts, steady crew. Not bad for someone who swore he wasn't going to start over. I smiled. Starting over wasn't the hard part. Believing I deserved to was. She looked at me thoughtfully. Most people want revenge. You wanted balance. I hope you know that's rarer than winning any lottery. I laughed quietly. Maybe. But revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It's about proving you can live well without them. Linda nodded. Then you've already done it. When I left the cafe, I walked down Congress Avenue, the city buzzing around me, street musicians, traffic, the scent of barbecue drifting from a food truck. The world looked ordinary again, beautifully ordinary. That evening, Ethan and Lily insisted on celebrating. It's been a year since the case ended, Ethan said. We should do something. What did you have in mind? I asked. Lily grinned. Picnic by the lake. So we did. We drove out to Lake Travis just before sunset, the same place where Laura had taken that first victory photo with her champagne glass. The lake shimmered gold in the fading light. We spread a blanket on the grass, unpacked sandwiches, fruit and the same brand of lemonade we used to buy when the kids were small. For a while, we didn't talk. We just watched the water ripple and the sun sink lower. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder. Mom used to bring us here, she said softly. I know, I said. Do you miss her? I looked at the lake, at the way the light faded into darkness so slowly, you almost didn't notice it happening. Sometimes, I said. But missing someone doesn't mean you want them back. It just means they mattered once. Ethan skipped a rock across the surface, 1, 2, 3, then gone. Do you think she'll ever come back to visit, maybe? And if she does, we'll welcome her with kindness. That's how we stay free. The air grew cooler as night fell. Fireflies began to blink around the edges of the grass. Lily pulled out her phone, snapped a photo of the three of us with the lake behind. Smile, she said. I did. For the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. When we packed up and headed home, the road was quiet. The kids fell asleep in the back seat, and I turned on the radio some old country song about second chances. At a stoplight, I glanced at them in the rearview mirror and felt that ache of pride that's too big for words. I whispered to myself, we made it. The next morning, I was up before dawn again. Old habits. I brewed coffee, stepped outside, and breathed in the cool air. The sky was still dark, just beginning to lighten on the horizon. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the fight, the silence, the small victories that came after. I didn't regret any of it. Regret belongs to people who wish they'd been different. I'd rather be grateful for what shaped me. When the sun rose, its light hit the fresh paint on the new sign in front of my office, Cooper Build and Restore. The letters glowed faintly in gold. Beneath it, in smaller print, I'd added a phrase, respect is the real fortune. A few workers arrived, waving as they passed. Life moved on. Before heading inside, I looked once more at the rising me and spoke softly as if to her, to the years, to the silence that had carried me this far. Sometimes revenge isn't rage, I said. It's reason and peace. Peace is the richest prize of all. I didn't know if the wind carried those words anywhere, but it didn't matter. Because I was already free. And if anyone out there had ever been underestimated, discarded, or told they weren't enough, I hope they'd find the same freedom. If you're listening, if you've been there, don't let anger be your story. Let strength be. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done. And if this story reminded you that respect outlasts fortune, hit that like button and subscribe. Because stories like this about justice, forgiveness, and finding peace are the ones that remind us we can all rebuild. And rebuilding, I've learned, is the truest revenge there is.